How would the story of UA High School progress if Deku never made it into the school? Hello, I'm Lime. I want to talk about how exactly the story of Boku no My Hero Macadamia Nut would have turned if Deku never made it to UA. First off, how exactly would this go? Fair warning, this is my opinion and imagination of what I think the story would be if this certain circumstances would affect the story. So please don't take it seriously, or if you don't like my opinion or whatever, just don't hate me for it. Thanks. We'll say that Deku ended up not meeting the sludge villain and would never be rescued by All Might. He ends up failing the exam to get in the hero course, and Bakugo is the only one from their old middle school to make it. So how would the story of UA actually turn out? Let's say the focus of My Hero Academia shifted from our precious cinnamon bun to our local hothead Lord Explosion murderer. The first thing to note here is who exactly would be in the class. In the original story, 1A consists of the Glamorous Cheeseman, Pink Queen, Frog Bean, Arm Choppers, Best Girl, yes I'm basic, Underrated Tailman, Best Boy, Definition of a Man, Underrated Animal Man, Diabetes Man, Tentacles, Jiro, Costume that makes me lose my shit whenever I look at it, Revelry in the Dark, Zuko with Ice, apparently a waifu, 420 Man, Cinnamon Roll, Absolute Sin, and Rich Girl with an incredible likability. It's important to figure out who exactly would actually qualify for 1A. We have to take out Deku obviously, and Uraraka most likely would not have made it since she got most of her points from saving Deku. We'll say that the top two students from 1B should be in class 1A, which are Monoma and Kendo. In episode 6 of season 1, the class goes through a test. The person to score the lowest would end up being expelled. Deku ends up being at the bottom of the list, but due to Eraserhead's impression of him, he ended up not expelling him. However, if Deku had never been there, that would leave Mineta to be the one expelled. He probably would have not had the same impression of potential that Deku left on Eraserhead, therefore would most likely be the one expelled. Monoma would probably score the highest, seeing as his quirk would allow him to copy those who have quirks optimal to each test. Bakugo would become enraged with this, sparking a rivalry. Since Monoma has the kind of nature that wants to play along and be better than anyone who's hot-headed like Bakugo, this kind of thing just suits him, you know? In episodes 7 and 8, 1A starts their first actual hero course, or class. There were 20 students in the class in 1A, however in our universe there would be 19 since Mineta's expulsion. For the sake of keeping things simple, we'll say that Todoroki is put against 1 versus 2 against Ojiro and Hagakure. Since Uraraka and Deku have been yeeted, Bakugo and Ida would go against Monoma and Kendo. This is really interesting since Bakugo would be still holding a grudge against Monoma, therefore he'd still rush to go kick his ass. Monoma would use Bakugo's anger to his advantage and most likely would team up with Kendo to beat him down. This is when it really comes down to analysis since we don't know anything about Kendo or Monoma until the sports festival. I personally think Monoma would send Kendo after the weapon while Bakugo faces against Monoma. Even though Monoma's smart, Bakugo's skills with his quirk would most likely overpower him, especially with Bakugo's gauntlets, rendering Monoma's defeat. Kendo's also pretty smart, so she'd probably figure out where the weapon is. This could go one of two ways. She'd either grab onto the weapon while Ida is basking in his villainy complex, or he would make sure to move the weapon on time. Regardless, I believe Bakugo and Ida would end up winning because Monoma would have underestimated their power, since it hadn't really been demonstrated yet. Regarding Momo, there's no telling who she'd be partnered with, however it wouldn't really matter since we actually saw who she went up against. Now here's where the big changes in the story lie. Formulating this part was extremely difficult for me, as many important moments here take place because of Deku. Because All Might never transferred his quirk to Deku, he hadn't lost so much stamina from the beginning, meaning he was able to make it to the first pursuit of the League of Villains. Shigaraki immediately pulls out Nomu to fight All Might, while 13 orders Ida to go get the rest of the teachers. Eraserhead stops Kurogiri from bringing Ida anywhere, as well as orders the rest of the class to evacuate. Bakugo tries to stay, as it's a very Bakugo move, if you know what I mean. Kirishima sees this and decides to stay with him. The rest of the students make it out, but because Bakugo takes too long, Eraserhead has to blink. The rest of the students make it out and flee, but Kurogiri teleports him to the weaker villains. All Might fights Nomu, and Eraserhead is teleported to the fallen buildings, where he fights numerous small fry villains alone in an attempt to get back to where he was. Shigaraki has his fit about letting the others escape, then observes Kirishima, Bakugo, and 13 fighting the villains. After taking down the small fry villains, they're left exhausted, but Shigaraki runs to attack Kirishima. 13 stands in the way to protect him, but Shigaraki manages to touch 13 before she can activate her quirk, turning to a dust, effectively killing her. Kirishima and Bakugo are left in awe. Kirishima suggests a retreat, but this only fuels Bakugo's rage. Bakugo, being extremely swift, dodges Shigaraki's hands and fires a gauntlet blast at him, injuring him greatly. Kurogiri immediately grabs him, then retreats, leaving only the remaining small fries in the different USJ zones. And the Nomu. All Might would for sure get injured in this fight, but ultimately Plus Ultra rocketing him into the sky, much like the original. The heroes arrive to finish off the rest of the small fry villains, and takes them all into custody, thus marking the end of this arc. Eraserhead, Kirishima, and Bakugo are taken to the school nurse in order to treat any injuries they may have gotten. Afterwards, Kirishima and Bakugo get questioned about the whereabouts of 13. After everything, they all get sent home. They'd also probably get lectured about not listening to their teachers, but in the end, they're kind of the reason that Shigaraki didn't get to do any more damage. This is the end of part 1. Tell me what you thought about in the comments. I'm very interested to hear if anyone has any objections, or if you agree, or whatever. There's so much more I want to discuss about this AU, as there's a whole lot more that would be different. Let me know if you want to continue this, and I thank you so much for watching my first video.